Good evening. Exactly. The time is 6:02. I'd like to call this meeting to order. If you'd all please stand for the I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Gary Stelborn. Here. Linda Shards.
Here.
Sean Peterson. Here. Lee Gorman. Don Cabello.
Here.
Linda Fedor.
Here.
Stephanie Walsh.
Here.
And Lisa Carrick.
Here.
Ted is not here. He's not going to be. All right. First order of business is review of the minutes for April 16th. There is one immediate correction that needs to be made. Under roll call, no voting privileges were granted last week. So that line needs to be stricken. Any other corrections that need to be made?
I'll move to accept.
All right, we have a motion to accept the minutes made by Lynn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Don. All those in
Excuse me,
favor? Yes.
I don't know if it matters that much, but we spelled Matt Raven's name wrong.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, it's Matt Raven, not Hayden. Who cares? Thank you.
It matters to them,
Yeah? All right.
That's just, I make a motion to approve it with that change.
With the two changes.
Yeah.
Okay. Lynn?
I move to accept with the two changes.
Okay, motion to accept with the two changes made by Lynn, seconded by Don. Any other discussion? All right, that motion carries. Next order of business is the presentation of the town audit. And at this time, I would like to welcome Kyle Connors to the podium. And if I may, does anybody have a spare pen and pencil I can borrow? I see you got one in the car.
Thank you, I can see that up there. Oh my God.
Hi, good evening. My name is Kyle Connors. I'm Managing Director from CBiz, and you're probably wondering why I'm member from CBiz this year and not Markham. We were acquired by CBiz in November of 2024, so we are now CBiz CPAs. We serve as the independent third-party auditors for the town of Plainfield, and I am going to walk you through the 2024 audit, how it went, and financial results, and certainly feel free to ask any questions that you might have. If you were to read through our financial statements, you'd see that we issued an unmodified opinion. That means we feel the financial statements that are presented by the town are free of material misstatements. So during 2024, the general fund's fund balance increased by $1.5 million, leaving you with unassigned fund balance of $13.3 million. The best way to determine whether you're in a healthy place from an unassigned fund balance in your general fund is compared to your operating budget. And so that $13.3 million represents 26.3% of your operating budget. Typically anything north of 8 we consider to be healthy. Hopefully you have slides in front of you.
Sure. Well, question, an 8%, what would that represent as far as, I don't know, we usually look for like 3 months of expenses.
Yeah.
Fund balance to cover expenses, what does 8% cover?
8% would cover less than 3.
Less than 3.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. There's a slide, I don't know if you happen to have these in front of you, but you can see how the town's fund balance in the general fund has grown over the last 6 years as the town's budget has also grown. So just nice to see a healthy, positive trend. your credit rating agencies, Moody's, S&P, like to see that number stay consistent and grow consistently over time. So in 2024, revenues were over budget by $1.5 million. Property taxes were $198,000 above what was anticipated, and that was due to two factors. The first being the tax collection percentage, which was 97.7% in 2024. We consider anything above 97% to be healthy. And also good collection of prior year back taxes in 2024. Municipal revenue was $379,000 above what was budgeted. This is largely due to the OPM using, there were new grants that were placed into service in 2024 that the town didn't initially budget for. Interest income was $720,000 above what was budgeted for due to strong market, and your other local revenue was above budget by $381,000. This was due to Connecticut Water paid the town for patching up a water project. Expenditures were $1.2 million under what was anticipated. You had favorable results in employee benefits of $262,000, general highway of $110,000, and debt service of $408,000. Also important to note that the Board of Ed had an even year, so their expenditures were consistent with their budget for 2024. The town spent $1.1 million in ARPA money, leaving $2.6 million deferred at year end. And all of that money is to be spent by December 31st, 2026. Looking at the WPCA fund, operating revenue was $2.7 million, an increase in the prior year, from the prior year, which was $2.4 million, so about $300,000 more. Operating expenses were $2.5 million, up $200,000 from the prior year. And that fund had ending net position of $9.1 million, with 1.6 of that being available for future operations. The town has a private pension plan that it offers. That plan is actually funded at June 30, 2024 at almost 104%. So it's not a net pension liability on your books, it's a net pension asset. So this is largely due to the town making its actuarially required contribution each year, as well as just strong markets in 2023 and 2024. It's grown about 14, almost 15% dating back to 2022, your funding percentage. The Board of Education administers an OPEB plan, which is healthcare for future retirees. That has a liability of $4 million at year end. It's funded at 24.6%, and just for some context, it was funded at 3.6% dating back to 2017. So that funding percentage has grown quite a bit. And a lot of communities really don't have much more than probably 8 to 10% of their OPEB funded, if they have it funded at all. So it's a pretty healthy position to be in. So we do have some findings this year and some recommendations for moving forward. The first of which, obviously, why we are presenting in April, as opposed to where we'd like to be presenting to you in January, February. We talked about this the last couple of years, but we really harped on it last year. The Board of Ed receives grants from the states, and they have their own financial reporting system. Back when we first started with the town, it was kind of being done on the back of a napkin, and we figured from an internal control perspective that probably wasn't the best system. So they have a financial reporting system now, and when it was initially set up, the flow of transactions wasn't appropriate. And so as the years have gone on, you get more and more transactions within the system. It becomes more and more challenging to reconcile it. Last year, we were able to kind of clean it up and get it reconciled to the point where we were comfortable enough with the numbers to issue your financial statements. But that reconciliation was done outside of the system. And so going into 2024, all of the grant transactions were still flowing the same way they had historically done. And so Courtney took on the role of finance director with the Board of Ed. She kind of stepped into it and realized that there was a lot that had to get corrected before we could get comfortable with this year's audit. And like I said, the more years that go on, not correcting the flow of transactions. There's just more and more to unravel each year. So they did bring in an accountant to help them. They were able to spend, I imagine, a lot of time correcting the flow of transactions for 2024, and I know they're working on it if they haven't already completed it, so that this won't be a problem in the future, and transactions will flow the way they're meant to through their financial reporting system. So obviously that led to delays. We kind of got a lot of work done in the fall, and we just kind of came to a standstill while the Board of Ed and their accountants sorted out their grants. Once they did, we were able to pick back up and get to where we are now, which is, presenting the financial statements. From a recommendation standpoint, continue that work, continue to utilize the accountant to help make sure that this isn't a problem in future years. The second finding that we had is due to a restatement in the Town and Board of Education's Internal Service Fund. Asked Egypt to invest into CDs so that you weren't at least missing out on some form of interest income on that money. Those were created, I think, last year. They weren't reported to us, and so we had to restate the opening balance to account for the $1 million in CDs that we didn't report last year. And then the last recommendation is one that we do to give to everyone that we work with. Is just to continue cybersecurity training on an annual basis. Municipalities are being targeted for ransomware and malware constantly. If you haven't done it recently, performing vulnerability testing, making sure that there's no access points to the Town or Board of Ed systems that could, what these hackers could have access to. And then from a single audit perspective, we are in the process of completing our steps. There is state and federal funding that both the Town and Board of Ed receive. If you meet a certain threshold, for the federal it's $750,000, we're required to select a couple of programs, make sure that the money's being spent correctly, that it's being reported to the state and to the federal government correctly. I don't have any non-compliance to bring to your attention at this point. We're probably halfway through it. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I have a couple questions. Based on what you're telling us, we've made progress compared to what we've done in years past. Do you foresee us as a town, both the town side and the Board of Ed, having the now capabilities to completing next year's audit by the end of the calendar year?
Yeah, the accountant that the Board of Ed is brought in to work with, very reputable, have a lot of experience in the government world. I've worked with them and Jeremy on many projects, and they always come through. They do a great job. And so I have a lot of confidence that they are putting the Board of Ed in the right position that they need to be.
The other question I have, you mentioned the Egypt account was now used potentially as an investment vehicle, at least retaining some interest for us. Is that going to be creating a new revenue stream that we need to have accounting for?
So that money, that interest will be restricted to your Egypt expenditures through your self-insurance. There's just, the town and the board both pay a premium every month. If your expenses are lower than your premium, then funds build up. If they're higher, then they decrease, but they had built up quite a bit. And so rather than trying to withdraw a portion of those funds to be used for operational use, the town and board both decided that it made sense to leave them with Egypt, but at least get some interest on them to be used on potential future medical expenses. Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong on that.
So interest could be used to defer some medical expenditures.
Yeah, that's correct.
You mentioned under the post-employment benefits that our plan is now funded at 24.6%, and you view that as a healthy balance because a lot of other municipalities are not in that state. What do you attribute that to?
Yeah, so
Both the positive for us and the negative for the other municipalities.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. Pension liabilities and OPEB liabilities, which is post-employment health care, really were never at the forefront of your financial statements. If you were to look at your financial statements before GASB 68 and 75 came out, it was kind of just buried in the back of the financial statements. It was just kind of like a note disclosure. Once communities were required to put the full balance of what their liabilities were on the face of the financial statements, make it far more transparent, that's when you started to see communities say, okay, maybe we should think about really funding these. And that was probably about 7-8 years ago for OPEB, so it's fairly fresh. Pensions were always talked about, that was important to fund. Healthcare was kind of ignored by a lot of communities until the last 7 years. So.
Another question I have is based on the financial status of the town. Do you think that will, and you may not be able to answer this, but do you think that will provide for us a favorable bond rating?
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into bond rating. You have a net pension asset. That's huge. A lot of communities don't. Filing a little more timely goes a long way towards meeting your continuing disclosure. You have a healthy fund balance in your general fund as it compares to your operating budget. So I think those are all healthy factors.
You referred to the fund balance of being very healthy, where you listed 8 to 20% is considered favorable.
Yep.
We're at 26. Do you feel that that's maybe too much?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's probably the one I'm asked most often. It's really tough to say because every community is different, and also you've got to factor in that you received a lot of ARPA money that you never would have expected had the COVID not taken place. So, capital costs that you're paying for out of your ARPA funds maybe would have been paid out of your general fund, and that number would be lower. So, it is on the higher side. It's not a bad place to be. It's a very good place to be. And on the Board of Ed side too, there was 3 tranches of ESSER funds, which have now dried up. That was a lot of money that the Board of Ed was able to receive to spend on their operating costs that maybe would have been sucked from the town's general fund as well. So at least you're in a position to, once you're beyond ARPA and ESSER, to have the funds necessary to meet your obligations. And who knows, maybe we'll have another thing.
You said 8% is healthy. What would you like to see us carry for an hour?
Yeah, I'm only in a position to tell you where you're at, not necessarily where you should be at. But a lot of communities do have minimum fund balance requirements that are as a part of the bylaws that you could adopt.
Do you see, we're already 10 months into this year, so we got 2 more months before the whole process starts all over again.
Yeah, isn't that exciting, Kelly?
Do you see any issues going forward? I know the Board of Ed saw that corrective action plan and stuff. Do you see anything in place that, signifies that we should have a green light all the way, or any work in the system?
Yeah, the only other change going into 2025 is GASB 101, which is a change in the way compensated absences are going to be reported. And so we'll be on top of that and communicating what we need from both sides well in advance. But no, I think we're in a good spot.
Any other questions? So we've contracted with you folks for another year.
Correct.
And I'm looking forward to the continued progress that we made from last year to this year. Hopefully that continues on and that this becomes a very profitable working relationship with both parties. Appreciate you coming out and sharing everything, the insights of the audit for us and making the recommendations. I do think that this year we took some, particularly on the Board of Ed side, took some proactive steps to improve the process. And we can see that by being ahead of where we were last year, so by a healthy time frame. So thank you for that, for your input and for your suggestions. Are there any other questions? If not, I will entertain a motion that we accept the audit report as presented by Kyle Connors representing CBiz.
I'll move to accept this presentation.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion made by Don, seconded by Linda. Any other discussion? If not, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? That motion carries. One abstention. Thank you again for your time. Appreciate you coming out.
Thank you.
At this point, I will look for a motion to
Move to adjourn.
move to adjourn made by Lynn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by, was that you, Sean? All right. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. This meeting is adjourned.